Volume 5 of the Bible story by Arthur S Maxwell. And we are at, move your mouse, we are at part 1, story 7, The Still Small Voice. Okay? Elijah must have tried after and must been rewind. Elijah must have been very tired after all the excitement of that great day on Carmel, besides running all the way to Jezreel in front of Ahab's chariot. All being so tired, he wasn't ready for the shock that came to him the next day. He was still resting when a messenger arrived from Queen Jezebel, who had heard from Ahab what had happened to the prophets of Baal. She had not been on Mount Carmel. She had not seen the fire from heaven, so she refused to believe that the breaking of the drought had to do anything with Elijah and his God. Furious that her prophets had been killed, she sent this message: let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. Suddenly fear seized Elijah, forgetting that God could have taken care of him, could have cared for him just as well in Jezreel as he had in the brook of Sirith, or on the top of the Mount Carmel. He arose and went for his life. He came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah. 200 miles he fled from this angry woman. Instead, it was not until he had reached the southern boundary of Judah that he began to feel safe again. Then, leaving his servant in Beersheba, he went along a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat under a juniper tree. By this time he was completely worn out. His spirits were so low that he even prayed that he might die. Then he fell asleep. And these are condensed verses. Okay? And as he lay and slept, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. God did not forget him. God had not forgotten his weary servant, through though he had run away from danger. Waking, Elijah looked around him and saw a cake baking on coals and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink and laid down again. How long he slept, nobody knows. It might as well have been for hours, so tired as he was. Then the angel of the Lord came. It has an illustration of him outrunning his servant up here at the top. He's running faster than the servant. But 100 miles? That's still a long way to go. Again, the second time, he touched him and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great is too great for thee." So Elijah found a second meal waiting for him in the desert. As he ate, he must have thought how wonderful it was that God knew where he was and where he was going, that God knew he would find no food on the way, and that God knew that such a journey was too great for his strength. Gratefully, Elijah did eat and drink, and and went in strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount unto Horeb, the mount of God. All his life he had always wanted to see Horeb, where so many wonderful things had happened to the children of Israel in the long ago. He knew it was called the Mount of God, and he hoped that perhaps he might come closer to God there than he had ever been before. "My God is Jehovah," he whispered to himself as he journeyed from from day to day over the trackless wilderness. "My God is Jehovah, but will I see him when I reach his mount? Will I hear his voice?" At last he arrived and stood in awe upon the historic mountain. Horeb, at last. Here where Moses had stood. Here where God had spoken along with his faithful servant when Israel came out of Egypt. But where is God now? Suddenly a great wind came up, far greater than the one that had brought the rain to Carmel. It roared up the ravines and churned the dust of the desert into clouds, picking up great rocks as if with invisible hands. It dashed them to pieces against the mountainside. And then, of course, it has a beautiful painting. Painting by Manning D. V. Lee. And I'll show you what it is. It's the angel touching Elijah. Elijah. It is. And the caption says, afraid of the threats of an angry Queen Jezebel, Elijah escaped to the wilderness and wished that he might die. But God sent his angel to encourage his faithful prophet. And then we go to the next page. But God was not in the wind. Soon the earth began to tremble. Cracks opened up in the earth. Elijah had never known such a quake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then the sky glowed as fire burst out of the mountaintop. Elijah remembered the story of how fire and smoke had covered the mountain when God gave Israel the 10 Commandments. But God was not in the fire. Then where was he? Very near indeed, much nearer than Elijah dreamed. As the prophet sheltered in a cave, he presently heard a small, still voice. Could this be God? He had thought the Almighty God of heaven might be in the hurricane, in the earthquake, or in the raging fire, but not in a voice so soft and so gentle as this. Yet as he listened, he felt the power of God in the words that were spoken. For God asked him one simple question: What doest thou? Dost thou here, Elijah? In other words, what are you doing here? He did not expect this. He had come all this way to communicate with God and worship Him, not to answer questions. But he knew what God meant. He knew God was saying to him, Why are you in Jezreel standing for me before that wicked Jezebel? Why did you run away from her? Why did you not stay and follow up the victory I gave to you on Carmel? Elijah, oh Elijah, why did you fail me? That still that still small voice moved the prophet more than all else he had seen and heard on Horeb. He began to excuse and pity himself. I, even I only, am left, he said, and they seek my life and take it away. No, God said to him, I have left me I have left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which had not bowed unto Baal. The suggestion was, they haven't run away. Then God told him to return to his post of duty. On his way, he was to anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, Jehu to the king of Israel, and Elisha, to take his place as prophet of the Lord. As he journeyed northward towards Damascus, Elijah could again and again for what had happened. Elijah thought again and again of what had happened at Horeb. How could he ever forget it? The further he traveled, the louder grew the still small voice, until it seemed to shout above the roar of the earthquake, wind, and fire. Go, return, go, return. And Elisha, shalt thou anoint to be a prophet in thy room? Thus had God spoken. Humbly, Elijah proceeded to obey. And then it has a picture of the fire up at the top of the mountain going off. And then Elisha with his oxen, his 12 oxen. So there's the fire of the mountain, which God wouldn't in. And down at the bottom is the oxen that Elisha has. Okay? And yeah, that's the end of story 7. So that's the end. So we're going to take our break and then we'll read this again later. So we're going to take our break and we'll see you in a bit.